All right, who wants to watch me get grilled by LIA member Preston? We started off with me interviewing him about his experience inside the LIA program, and we flipped the script. He grills me about how he can scale his business, who he needs to hire into his business, how to hire them, how to find a COO, all of the nitty gritty. Preston's been an amazing member inside the LIA program. Been doing this about 6 months, scaled up, doing about 4 deals a month, on track to do multiple 6 figures this year. I think you guys are really gonna like this interview. Without further ado, let's dive in. All right, what's going on, guys? Sumner Heeley from landinvestor.co, your favorite land investing dingus, joined by Preston, who's in his new home. Preston, where are you calling in from?
Houston, just got back.
Nice, man. And where were you living prior to Houston? You just had a big move, yeah?
Yeah, I've been kind of a nomad since I graduated. The last year was up in New York. So,
okay.
Yeah, was up in New York for a year, followed a woman, brought her back to Texas, did what I had to do.
There you go. That's, yeah. When you see most men traveling around the country, I feel like it's work or you're following a woman. That's pretty darn typical. Yeah. Dude, talk to me just for context for the folks that are new here. Preston's been with us since, I would say, like the beginning of Q4 or Q3 of 2022. You were doing real estate, but in a kind of a whole different fashion, right? You were a real estate agent, made the pivot into land. Talk to me, how did you even stumble upon this wacky world of land investing? Then we're going to dive deep into your story.
Sure, man. Yeah. So, I mean, after school, took some odd jobs, bounced around, kind of moved around the country. Then kind of did the normal thing in the corporate world. I was in wealth management. And then, like you mentioned, transition, went to New York, worked in real estate. And I did like the autonomy that real estate brought and the tangible side and just like the asset class. But I was like, finding people apartments wasn't going to be my career. And I thought, I knew people were land agents. And I thought, why not be a land agent? I love that asset class as well. But then I kind of stumbled into, oh, wait, there's a land investing world. And once I found that, I got pretty obsessed pretty quick.
That's usually how it goes. For the people that stick around in this business, it's not like, oh, I think I like land. It's like this feverish obsession. Like it gets under your skin really quickly. Do you remember, were you Googling late at night? Were you on YouTube? What was like the trigger point for being like, oh, because most folks, this is such a sub niche upon a sub niche upon a sub niche. Sure. It's pretty hard to uncover this business model. Do you remember where you first saw it?
Sure. I mean, I knew there were actually classes. You could take classes with certain MLS, like real estate groups that crazy expensive. And they were like, more on the brokerage side and some investing stuff. And I was like, well, let me see if there's anything, started Googling around YouTube as well. And there's not a lot of content out there. I think, you kind of fill that space, a couple other people. But I think people are hungry for it.
They are. Yeah, it's an interesting... There's a mismatch of like insatiable want. And it's still not a big cohort of people that are looking for land content. But the people that are like, I need it. I want it. And there's just very little that's actually being delivered out there. I also think there's very little that's even relatable, right? Like a lot of the stuff is pretty dry and stoic.
I mean, I talked to a lot of friends, like even my friends on Wall Street in New York were like, didn't even know about this business.
No. Yeah. It's pretty miraculous, right? Dude, so you're an interesting kind of example of someone who does a lot of things correct, in my opinion, right? I think some of this is probably just innate to who you are, but like when you joined the LIA program out of the gate, you had no trepidation with scaling your mailing, right? And so it's like the level of activity that you're putting forth was higher than most. The other thing that I see, which is like some of it's chance, some of it's just based on the inputs that you're putting forth. So it's a bit of both, but you got your first few deals really quickly. And in the grand scheme of things, like getting your first few deals done in 3 months or so, that's a really profound way to build momentum. Like I always tell people, those first few deals are not to make you rich. First year is not to, the first 2 years even. But you need that proof of concept. You need those reps. And I think for a lot of people, and maybe this wasn't the case for you, but for a lot of people that I talk to, they're doing this, but there's a sense of disbelief, right? They're kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Does this really work? And once you see it, you believe it. You're like, oh, this is real. So talk to me about how that kind of played out for you in the beginning with getting the first few deals done.
That's a good question. I mean, I totally resonate with people having 1 foot in, 1 foot out in regards to like the skepticism. I mean, I think that's why I went all in very quickly. I was like, let's see if this just works, you know? And I'm a pretty, like I mentioned, I'm a pretty obsessive person. So
yeah.
I just went all in. And it's funny, I actually sold one of those first like mailers this morning, sold one of those listings, which is pretty
no way.
It's going to make me like, you know, $5,000-6,000, but it's more so just as we talked about, just like proof of concept.
Yeah.
So if anybody feels, you know, hesitant or skeptical, one, I totally understand that. I was the same way, but the only way to find out is to send mail out. So, you know, the first month I sent mail was November, and I sent 10,000 pieces of mail. Like, if you don't get a deal after 10,000 pieces of mail, like, you know, you're probably doing something wrong. But yeah, and like you said, it's not to make you rich, right? You're still in business. So that's what I would recommend to anybody.
Yeah. It reminds me of a quote from Alex Hormozy that's always stuck with me. I don't know where I heard it from him, but it was essentially like, there's typically a disconnect with most people in any business with understanding how much input it actually takes to achieve the desired result, right? And so I think a lot of people hear us talk about like 2,000 letters per deal or 2,500 letters per deal. But one, that's a tiny sample size. And when you're in the beginning, we got to understand that you're most likely not very good at picking markets, pricing data, all that jazz. And so I hear people starting businesses and they're like, yeah, I left 10 flyers on a car, or made 15 cold calls. It's like, it's just not enough. One, for you to get the result that you want, but also to get better at it, right? And so you just had a high quantity of reps really, really quickly.
Yeah.
Talk to me in the grand scheme of things. This has probably been coming up on 6 months or so being in the land game. Is that accurate?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you know, the first couple months learning systems, learning the game.
Yeah.
But it would be, I guess this makes 4 months of mailing now.
4 months of mailing. Okay. 4 months of mailing. So yeah, probably 5 or 6 months or so kind of in the game. Talk to me about your most memorable deal today. I'm sure there's been an interesting one. That's just the nature of this business. What do you got?
No, that's a good question. I mean, so I sold a deal up in North Georgia. And it was funny because now looking back, it's like, wait, that was actually a really great deal. And it was like a fire sale. Just because I just wanted to make the money, you know? I think it was a 4-acre property. I think the lowest property was the lowest 4-acre, 5-acre property in that whole area was like $46,000. I was like, I'm gonna undercut the market. I bought this thing for around like $14,000. Wow. I listed it for like 37. Went under, you know, it's $20,000 in a day, which was pretty because it went 24 hours, which was nice. But it's like, the creek and all this stuff. Now I think back, now that it's been a couple months, like I wonder what I could have sold that for.
Yeah. That's a blessing and a curse about this business, man. It is so easy to look in the rearview mirror and be like, I could have got so much more for that. But I still think like, one, you don't know what you don't know. So it's kind of hard to factor that in the moment. I still misprice lots all the time. But the other thing is I do think in the grand scheme of things, this is doing like quick mental math. I'm like, if you redeploy that $20,000 3 or 4 more times in the same time, like you'll make more money in the long run, right? Yeah. So it's a good problem to have. But it is funny that if you go back and look at the deals, you're like, shit, I could have gotten way more for that. That's blessing and a curse of this business. But you know, really at the end of the day, like we are also in the business of being a market maker. It's the way I think about it, right? Like just like stocks on Wall Street, like we're trying to make the market a little more efficient. And so sometimes that means offering a great deal to someone, right? To move in a liquid asset. Yeah. What about like, well, I guess that's actually a pretty insane deal. I'm curious too, in terms of acquisition channels, have you just been all direct mail? Talk to me about how you've been getting these deals.
All direct mail.
All direct mail, okay.
Yeah. I mean,
all direct mail, all blind offers.
Yep.
What's that process been like for you? I know that like if I look at kind of a generalization of the folks inside the program, like the commonality that I see that's difficult for folks is pricing markets, selecting markets, all that jazz, and then either or talking to sellers, right? I think you're probably pretty smooth on the phones. Did you have difficulty selecting markets, or that come pretty naturally?
No, I think, man, I don't think anybody, I hope maybe like just becomes an expert at selecting markets right off the bat. And that deal that we just referenced was a really good evidence of what selecting the right market can look like. I mean, I have deals listed now that have, you know, 27, 28, whatever grand spreads. But they haven't moved in a day just because it's not that kind of market. So, I mean, that's still a learning process for me.
Dude, always. I'm still in the same boat. I mean, sometimes I bash my head against the wall. I'm like, do I even know what I'm doing? You do. It's just difficult stuff. It's not easy. And that's like where we really extract value as land investors, in my opinion, is some part selecting markets. It's like selecting markets, quantifying the value of a data set that's disparate and there's no like true understanding of what values are. and then working leads. It's like, that's where we derive the value. I think people are always shocked that that's not easy. It's like, if it was easy, there would be no defensible moat to this business and competition would be through the roof. You should be thankful that it's difficult, right? Because if you're willing to put in the work, there's a really nice kind of barrier to entry that keeps other people.
I don't know if you said this, but I think you said this. Or someone said this. It was like, it's a simple business. It's not an easy business.
Yeah.
And that's for
so true. So true. The core mechanics, right? We got acquisitions, operations, dispositions. On paper, you're like, this is so easy. And then you're in the trenches. It's not quite that easy, right? So talk to me about you as as a land investor. What's your superpower? What might be like your kryptonite, if you will?
I mean, I come from a sales background.
Yeah.
And I'm an introvert, but I love people. So I do think on the phone. And what's nice is, if you're listening as a real estate agent, these people that we talk to, I love this clientele, man. Like, at least as far as, the people that help find apartments or find houses, I love talking to these kinds of people in the land world. And they have a real connection to the land. So they appreciate what we appreciate. So I would say that's, getting deals done on the phone, negotiating. Would be my superpower. If that's probably too big of a.
What about the inverse of that? What's the part where you're like, ugh, I'm ready to get this off my plate?
Man, just like the nitty gritty. Excel work. Pricing, and really just like mail tracking, which is super important. Tracking metrics. Return on ad spend, everything like that. It's just really hard for me to get myself in front of the computer.
I'm the same way. I don't. Sometimes I hesitate on what my superpower is, but my kryptonite for certain is organization and tracking. Like, dude, if I didn't have someone to do it, it would not get done. And it's funny because I'm such a big proponent of like meticulously tracking your data and your KPIs, but I'm just not the guy for the job, right? And that's a real big hang up for me. But it doesn't mean that shouldn't get done. It's pretty easy to delegate that out. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. What we're going to do on this call is we're going to flip the script here, and Preston is going to grill me for questions on how he can kind of move to the next step in his business. Before we do that, though, talk to me about what is the next step? Like, what is 2023 on the vision board? What does that look like for your land business?
Yeah,
maybe just for your life in general.
For sure. I mean, I think you just alluded to it. I mean, I think I'm still learning so much. Like, every deal, every call. I mean, just some basics, I still have to learn. So I think just getting solidified in that.
Yeah.
And then building a team where I can, at the end of the year, look back and just be like, all right, I'm here. I'm in the space. I'm here to stay in the space. And just feeling more confident in regards to delegation and hiring and being able to channel kind of what I feel like I can do best and just, create, just being here. So,
yeah. Dude, it's an interesting phenomenon that I've seen is that this business is typically the first step in someone's entrepreneurial journey, right? Like, if I look at the average for people inside the group, and I would say, like, maybe I would zoom this out for all land investors, a lot of these folks come from high-paying W-2s, right? They're making a couple $100,000 in a W-2. There's problems, they want to leave, whatever it may be, but this is like their first tiptoe into it. And that's why I think that, like, as an industry, there's so much hesitation to hire because it's big, it's scary, it's unknown, right? We're going to touch on that here in a second. In terms of like the controllables, right? I want to send this much mail. I want to do, this many deals isn't really controllable, but do you have any kind of roadmap that you're working towards in that sense?
Yeah, well, to start off, right, I sent the 10,000 mailers. I think once you do that, especially as an individual, it becomes difficult to stay consistent with that. Because you're managing the acquisition, the dispo, everything in between. So, right now I would love, and I have been like sending like 6,000 to 7,000, what I feel like solid marketing, mailers. So just moving forward, I'd love to get back to that 10,000 level and have them all be high quality and have the team to help deal with that.
Yeah. Okay. And so, and before we move forward, in terms of a team, what does that look like? It's Pat Live. Is there anyone else additional on your team?
No, just
Cool. All right, man. Well, let's flip the script. Let's talk about the questions you have for me, right? Like let's treat this as if it's a coaching call. Everyone else can be a fly on the wall. You're 6 months into your business. You're doing decent volume with your mail. Definitely doing good volume with the deals you're going after. You're going after the right deals. Don't think there's probably too many questions around there. Like it's a big statement, but I would say you're pretty damn close to mastering the fundamentals of the skill of land investing, right? I always tell people it's like two sides of the coin. When you first start, skill acquisition, get good at the skill of land investing. That's all based on your input, right? It's like one-to-one input to output. And then eventually you take that skill and build a business around it. I reckon we'll go that direction, but I could be wrong. So what do you got for me, man? Grill me.
It's nice to even ask you questions because I feel like, I'm kind of asking, you had to kind of pioneer this, I would assume, like with a lot of mistakes and kind of.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. Like I was a stubborn bastard, and I still am. So there were educators out there that came way before me. There's people that have been doing this for friggin' eons, like dinosaurs in this industry. I never resonated with either the community aspect or the approach, right? I think a lot of what's taught is land investing as a skill and not land investing as a business. And I come from a background of building businesses, so I was fascinated with that aspect. So I've taken pieces from everyone. Like I don't even know if original exists in this world, but I've spit it out to Sumner's version. If that makes sense.
Sure. But I'll say, I encourage anybody, getting in the space, learn as much as you can from whoever you can. But nobody else has really even that I've talked to been more scaling, had that scaling mindset that you have. I feel like
I appreciate that, man.
Building a business, which I appreciate. But so tell me about your first hire, or your first couple of hires.
Yeah.
Was it when they did days or?
It's a good question. It's a really funny story. So my very, very first hire was actually the only job I ever worked. So when I moved back to San Diego, I was doing, I guess it's kind of my second. I was doing an internship at Raytheon in Washington, D.C. Moved back to San Diego, I believe it's 2018, I think is the year. And I go and get a job at a pretty like badass, it's not a design agency. Essentially what they were doing is like, they had figured out that there was a need for Fortune 500 companies to have PowerPoints designed for them. And they would charge them $2,000 to $3,000. They would get them on retainer, and like their sales teams and marketing teams would just send them presentations. Like they're doing like close to 10 million a year. It's a really cool, kind of cool niche business. Anyways, I was looking for a job. I needed some money in the interim when I moved back to San Diego, but I really what I wanted to do is glean some insight from another entrepreneur. Like I didn't have enough money to invest in coaching. I had a few like good businesses or a lot of bad ones, but I never had anything that was like of substance. So I found this guy. His name is Rick Enrico. I probably owe him a thank you letter. I was thinking about him earlier this week. We got on the phone. He was the owner of the company. We just vibed. And he was like, dude, you're a lot like how I was back in the day. And he had a lot of failures to get to his first real win. And he was in his 40s. And he'd been playing the entrepreneur game for about 20 years and just tripping, falling, false starts. So still think it's going to work. Then he gets sued, like all this stuff. So I'm like, okay, I like this guy. And I was like, I want to work with you. But the caveat is I want to learn from you. And so he said, sure. And so he kind of gave me like special treatment, if you will. I'd come in on weekends, just chop it up with him. He would show me the back end of how they ran their business. And what's so funny is how I run my businesses today is so much of what I do is gleaned from him. That's the way they track their KPIs, the way they hire overseas, the way they build their sales team, the way they track the ROAS. Like that's awesome. Totally different business model, but I've emulated a lot from him. So I moved back to San Diego. I'm working there. There's a guy named Dan Madison, who's the VP of sales, and he was like my manager, right? I was working on the sales team. Loved this guy. We like clicked from the jump. So that guy was actually my first hire, which is crazy. So when I left that company after like 11 months, so very short stint there, he said, hey, can I come with you? And I was like scared out of my mind. Like this guy's making like 150, 200K a year at this job. We made like 150K my first year in the land business. And that was like what I was jumping in with.
Whoa.
So I was like, yeah, I think I'll hire you. And I knew I wanted him because he was a sales savage and he had like more operational experience than I did. So anyways, that was my first hire. And it was pretty crazy, man. Like it was a weird place to start for your first hire. Didn't start with a VA. Super weird. This guy was so overqualified for the role. It was insane. And we went on this wild freaking journey. We ended up rolling up a bunch of properties in North Carolina, selling them to essentially like this PE firm in Florida that bought like these 32 properties from us in one go. It was a crazy win. We had a bunch of investors. We were like, holy shit, we cracked the code. Then he had a life event come up. So we ended up parting ways, but on great terms, but there's family stuff. So that was my first hire. While we were working together, he had experience because the company that I was working at in San Diego, the design agency, they had over 100 virtual assistants in the Philippines. They had a huge office over there. And so he had a ton of experience hiring and managing these VAs. And so I learned a ton from him in respect to that. We brought on a guy out of, his name was Jesus. We brought on a guy named Jesus out of Colombia, out of South America. Nice guy, had all sorts of issues. He was 600 pounds at one point, then he was anorexic, then he was like 400 pounds, then he was anorexic again.
Right.
He claimed he had cancer, but was curing himself. He lived with his boyfriend in Colombia. He was super erratic. Like, there were so many red flags. Don't know why we hired this guy. And he turned out to be just a nice guy, but a disaster. So he came in like a bull in a china shop, just made a bunch of mistakes in our business. The second hire was Newman. And if anyone's ever interfaced with my land business, you guys know Newman. I always tell people Newman has changed my life, right? And like, this is where I first understood the concept of a generalist VA and what it means to have like a mini operator in your business. And so there was like this weird iterative process to get there. And that was the catalyst to me kind of uncovering slightly the hiring framework that we use now inside the LIA program.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting. I didn't know Newman came along that early either. Like, seems like he's been
early and late. I mean, he came in 2 years in. So
I didn't know it was that long. What happened to the first guy? Right? What happened to the first gentleman?
Yeah, so I did a year by myself. The first guy lasted 7 or 8 months or so. In conjunction with that, we had Jesus, who lasted probably about 6 months.
Right.
And then we brought Newman on.
So do you think it's possible? Like, okay, I think everybody wants a Newman. And I've interacted with Newman. He's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you think it's possible as we're going and looking for that first hire to even like identify who that person is?
Yeah. I've thought about it a lot, man. There's a lot of really interesting variables that make Newman phenomenal. And of course, it's hard to quantify what makes a person good. But I'm talking about as it pertains to the role that he's in. And for you guys that don't know, Newman is now our COO. He's like just the operator of everything. Started as just a generalist VA though. So when I look back at it, the guy had tons of experience managing teams. Like, he had like 15 or 20 people sitting underneath him in his previous company. He had a really long tenure there. I think he was there for like 7 years or something like that. Because the company he was working for was a UK-based taxi company, he had like phenomenal English. Like, he spoke like he was British. So really, like, he almost had like half of an accent.
Wow.
And then just culturally, just like on an emotional level, we were just a really good fit. And what's interesting is we're both, I don't really buy into horoscopes necessarily, but he always says, we're both Tauruses. That's why we like each other. I don't know if that's true or not. But anyways, what was interesting is Dan, who was the guy, the US-based hire, they did not resonate. They did not vibe. But Newman and I really vibe. So I think part of it is a cultural fit in terms of how I run the business. But in terms of that operator role, I mean, he just had experience being organized, managing teams, overseeing departments. So I think it's that, right? And a long tenure. What you'll see with a lot of virtual assistants is 6 months here, 4 months there, 12 months there. That's not what you want in an operator, right? The trouble is, I think it's easy enough to spot when you see it. It's really effing hard to find, though. You know, that's a tough thing to find. It does come around, though. That's why I tell people, it's like, you always want to have your hiring funnel open. Sometimes you got to kiss a lot of frogs and bring people on that don't work out. But also, you just want to be seeing a lot of resumes, talking to a lot of candidates, because one good player on your team can alter your business and therefore alter your life.
Right. And I think that kind of goes towards what you were talking about, hiring and retaining.
Yep.
Like, and that's what's interesting is, you know, I'm ready to kind of look at and start this process. Do you have any recommendations on, all right, just like the actual nitty-gritty side of when you're interviewing, when you're talking to these people, what to look for? Do you feel like a long tenure prior is pretty important?
Yeah, I think like the truth is to all this stuff, I'm sure there's counter examples that prove me wrong, right? But in my experience, if we have to use some kind of formula to weed out the bad from the good, and we're going to miss some good in that process. But yeah, long tenure. One of the things that we do for all of our job listings, I think it's ultra important for like a COO listing or an operator listing, is there's a set order of how they have to submit their resume. And if that's not done, you instantly know that they're a bad fit. And some of that can be goofy. It's like, wear a white shirt, sit in front of the camera, watch this video, recite what you saw in the video. show me your English score because they're going to be overseas. And for some roles, not really applicable to COO stuff, but maybe. But you could be like, go find me 5 listings that sold in this market or whatever it may be. Like, just there should be an order of steps they have to go through that you instantly know, feel good. Those haven't been done, just on to the next, right? Now, when it comes to like actually integrating and speaking with the folks, I think that like humans have a pretty good gut instinct. Like, I just think that if you're somewhat intuitive, you'll pick up, because really, like, I think a lot of hiring comes down to not their, especially for a role like this, it's not just their qualifications, it's who they are as a person, right? And so I like to, one, get to know them and see, do we vibe? But also, I don't want to just look at their work experience. What do you like to do in your free time? How do you spend your time? How do you organize your days? What time do you get up in the morning? Okay, an interesting one that people do, I have never done this, but you say, how much money is in your bank account? They're like, what? Like, no, just curious. Send me a screenshot of how much money is in your bank account. I'm not going to do anything. And if there's a mismatch between what they said, because people feel inferior about their money, and then what they show, there's an honesty issue here, right? Or there's a yes man issue where they're trying to please. And so I think that, like, we're not trying to be assholes, but you do need to test these people thoroughly. And then the next step for me is like, if they're kind of making it through that cadence, because usually what we do is put the listing out there, we'll get a bunch of candidates, immediately remove 80% of them because they just don't match up, get it on a call with a few of them. A few of them will move to the next step, and we'll have 2 or 3 calls in total, short calls. We're not just chopping it up for hours. 15 minutes on the first, you'll know immediately, can I move to a second call? Then go a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper. And then at that point, we'll just do a 2-week pilot test. And so this kind of falls in line with the idea of like hire slow, fire fast type thing. Like, just bring them on a pilot and just let them know, like, this is kind of a probation period. There might be lower pay or whatever it may be, or no commission, just depends on the role. And then you're going to do a performance review at the end of the 2 weeks, right? I think the truth is, though, about hiring overseas is so much of it is on the impetus of the operator, right? So many people are like, I hired this VA and they sucked. No, you suck as a boss. Like, you suck as an operator. So a lot of it is do they have the raw core material? And then we kind of have to mold them to be a good fit for that role.
Right.
The truth is, dude, like, this stuff is not easy though, right? And I think this is better work because it's higher leverage than you sending mailers out all day.
Yeah.
But this is like market selection. Like, it's iterative. You're going to suck at it. You're going to kiss a lot of frogs. Like, I've hired so many people that didn't work out.
And what is if you go through the normal education system, like, what background do we have in hire?
Zero,
Zero,
dude. No, I know. We're taught that like delegation is a bad thing, or like exploiting is a bad thing. Like, no, this is a common human relationship called reciprocity, right?
Yeah.
We give you value, you give us value. And like, this is very normal to how humans work. We work in hierarchies. That's not a negative thing, but we're just never conditioned to have any understanding of that. And there's a belief that it's bad, right?
For sure. No.
So, yeah.
I do. So do you feel like, in regards to the VA, is the idea to groom them into a COO like you did Newman?
Yeah, I think that's like probably the best case scenario, right? And what will happen is either you get a generalist VA or you get someone that becomes a COO, right? But the generalist VA is doing like micro level operational tasks. And a lot of that's going to be their responsibility. Okay, you got to go find a drone photographer when the property is out of title. It's not I tell you, it's you go and have the kind of know-how and you do it on your own. Not in terms of we don't train you, but like in terms of, okay, this is the next step. Okay, the property has been done being photographed. You go list the property, right? Yeah, you update your KPIs. And so you want to see someone that takes ownership over that process. And that's what I noticed about Newman is he was doing all those micro level kind of operator-y tasks, but he had like total responsibility around it. Now, there's still stuff that had to come up where I had to educate him on the fact that, like, you'll see this a lot with virtual assistants. They want to do everything correctly. A lot of times they want to like win your approval. They want to like be a yes man kind of thing. And so they'll check with you for every decision. It's like, no, that actually removes the value out of this arrangement.
Yeah.
And so you need to do a little bit of hand holding, like, no, make a risk, take a chance, get it wrong. I would rather you do that for smaller decisions than ask me for everything. So there's still some grooming that needs to be done. But yeah, if they can take responsibility over the day-to-day kind of micro tasks that you assign to them, that's a really good indication. The other thing that we saw with Newman that was a really strong insight is that he had feedback about her business. Dude, that's crazy, right? That's a really key indicator to like, one, they're invested, like they want to have outcomes in terms of like this doing better. But they're also not afraid to speak up. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, no, just need a second pair of eyes. That's cool. And you said Newman had a pretty cool background, right? Before you hired him.
Yeah, he had a pretty cool background. I don't remember the exact breakdown of the role, but he was like managing a cold calling team for, or not a cold calling team, like a support team for a company that was in the UK. It's like a rideshare company, something like that.
Got you. So, I guess getting the VA to do those kind of, micro tasks throughout your day-to-day business, I guess they're seeing, if they eventually become COO, they're seeing the acquisition side, the disposition side. Is that the idea?
That's the idea, right? So like, because as the term implies, generalist, because they kind of have like their hand in a couple different buckets, over time, they should get pretty familiar with how the cadence of this business works. They should have, and eventually, a pretty good understanding of like, hey, I know how to do the day-to-day of this business, right? And eventually, like that operator role as your team grows becomes like a managing role too, right? So a lot of what Newman does is like leads our daily sales team meetings, tracks the team KPIs, holds them accountable, make sure the machine is turning, make sure the wheels are in motion at all times. And so it's like when you first start in this land business, the only leverage you have is marketing, right? And then you get a few employees, and then you have leverage over the employees. And then your employees start to have leverage over the other employees. So it becomes more and more and more of a pyramid. And so like the way Newman's role has grown is he was the guy hand-to-hand combat when he was like first the COO, doing all the things himself. Like I was working like 12 to 14 hours a day. It was crazy. The guy's work ethic is through the roof. Log in on the weekends with no questions asked and just grind it out. Never let anything slip through the cracks. And then as he's grown, it's like, no. It's not about you doing the hand-to-hand combat. Now it's about him managing the team, just like how I moved out of that role, right? So it's been an evolution for him as well. And sometimes, I mean, like, I think that, yes, I got really fortunate with having my paths cross with Newman, and we'll always be interconnected. Like I've given them equity in everything that I do, right? So like, dude, you're a rock star and I want you around for everything. But I also think that just came from just like when you hear the stories of the people getting the crazy deals inside the program. Well, this person bought it for $300K and sold it for $650K. That's such a crazy deal. It's like, yeah, but they were also sending out a ton of marketing. It's the same story here. Like if you're taking a ton of action, luck will be bestowed upon you, right? And you'll have a similar result like this. So you don't know when it's going to come. It might not be on your second hire like it was for me.
Yeah.
Might be on your first, might be on your 10th. Who knows? But it's an activity worth doing. The other thing is like this role does not have to be subbed out overseas. You can bring in a generalist VA that just operates as a generalist VA. And as your business grows, because you can run this business without a true COO up to about $1 million or so, I think, roughly.
All right.
And at that point, there's enough margin in this business that you can bring in a US-based operator. And it's tough to peg what their salary is going to be. 60 on the low end, maybe 120 on the high end. And they could bring a ton of value to this business. It's not to say that can't be brought here in the US, right? So I don't want to persuade people this can only be done overseas. But for where most people are starting, mid six figures, it's going to be a really hard thing to do. And you're most likely going to have to wear the operator hat for a while.
Yeah, no, I got you. No, I think it's also been impressive how you've been able to retain them. But I guess when they show their value, I mean, you do what you have to do, right?
For sure, dude, for sure. I mean, like it goes both ways. He shows up in a big way. I show up in a big way. Like, dude, I've done some things that are not common for like employee-employer relationships with loans and all sorts of stuff, right? And like, but that's so. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. It's stupid, but I feel like responsible for taking care of the people that I work for. That's not stupid. I think that most employers feel that way. And so I don't know, when you give people receptive to that and they give back, right? I think it's kind of like an equal. It goes back to reciprocity, right? So we've done some very informal arrangements to make this work in the long run, but it's all played out.
Did you mention that you're about to head over there? Did you say that? The Philippines?
So yeah, I'm heading over to the Philippines. So hopefully. So tickets booked, hotels booked, everything's booked. Fly out March 19th. All my friends are going. So my buddy runs a business that's pretty large, like a coaching business for personal trainers called PTBI. And she's got a team of, 6 or 7 people in the Philippines. I think I've got 6 people in the Philippines currently. We've lost a few people this year. The caveat is my passport isn't here. So fingers crossed. I've expedited it. Fingers crossed it comes on time. But yes, we're going to be going to the Philippines. I think one of the tricky things about running an overseas team is the fact that it's overseas, right? And so I think showing up in person, deepening these relationships can go a long way because these people are rock stars. The trouble that we've seen with hiring overseas is turnover or retention. right? And so my thought is like being there, boots on the ground, I think does a lot for building that connection. I also have a vision. I don't know, we're definitely not at the size yet where it makes sense, but building out an office there and kind of consolidating a space for all of them to work in, right? It's actually pretty crazy. Like the cost is not that insane. There's some stuff you have to do with putting it in their name because we can't put it in our name, that kind of jazz. Yeah. It's actually pretty feasible, right? And I think that does a lot for building the company culture. I'm so bullish on hiring overseas, but I think the way that people look at it as in like virtual assistants is not a scalable method. Like, let me build a real team and a real culture, but it's just going to be overseas.
Right. So what kind of tasks would you recommend I know you kind of said the micro tasks, like find a drone guy, talk to the title company. You know, what's interesting is, and I've talked to some different people in the group and they have different philosophies. So I almost think, and I'm, people, on the pricing side, people will go extremely analytical. And I don't, just based off our conversations, this might, be a characterization, but I'm kind of more like you, I think, where it's just kind of just price it and get it out. Like you can get as deep as you want. Yeah. I think you mentioned like a 24-hour rule, which is something I try to kind of follow. But as far as the VA side, I mean, I like the test I referenced, the title company, the drone guy, but do you think I could also hire a VA to, all right, this is the market I want, price it, scrub it, etc.?
For sure. Yeah, no, 100%. We're going through this in our business right now. It's actually not as difficult as you would think to find someone that has those skills. It's really difficult to train them, though. I will say, like, getting them up to speed with how we do things. We found people that have like essentially master's degrees in data analytics overseas, but there is just still a weird learning curve for them to do what we do, right? And I found like when we talk about like binary mailers like we do for newer folks in the program, that's where they got to start. Like it's like, dude, take this 300 unit subdivision and just price that. And I haven't seen that they can do the bigger stuff yet, but I also haven't had enough time there, right? And so it's a little bit tricky because I've got my own deeply held beliefs, and there's always exceptions to every rule. But I think that like even though you're good at the phones and you like being on the phones, I still think that it's a higher value task for you to be doing the market selection, the mailing. Like I think for a few reasons. One, I'm not even so sure that I can find someone that's phenomenal at it. That's at a cost that's realistic. I'm still working through that. I found someone that's okay, but they're not phenomenal yet. On the flip side, you're not phenomenal at it yet, and you deserve to get phenomenal before subbing it out. I think it's a little too soon to sub that out. The other thing is that I would rather have you as the business owner working on proactive work that's at your own discretion. The trouble with being your own acquisition manager is you're held hostage by your phone, right? You never know when things are coming in. And you have Pat Live as kind of an intermediary, but it's a tough place to live in. You very quickly become the hand-to-hand combat, which we want to train you as much out of that as possible, right? So one of the things I would recommend is one, auditing your time, figuring out where all your time's going. I would reckon, is that speaking to sellers?
Yeah.
It is. Okay. So if that's where all your time is,
I mean,
yeah, it's all over. Yeah, you're doing a lot, right? But I would still venture to guess because I think you have your head in the right place with the pricing and the market selection. Like you are doing it correctly and it's still working, right? Like you're not over investing and putting too much time to it where it just doesn't make sense where you're going to get on the back end, and you're still getting deals. So that part you're doing well there, right? I don't think I'm sure you're going to get some more skills over there over time, but it's probably about raising that volume. But what I would rather have you do, I think for where you're at, honestly, how many deals are you averaging a month right now for acquisitions?
I would say I'm averaging like 4
deals a month. Okay. I think, to be honest, for where you're at, this is how I would skin the cat. I would bring on, I think an acquisition manager is probably going to serve you better. You're sending a good amount of volume for mailers, right? I think that a solo operator quickly caps out around $10,000, $12,000 a month. It's really hard to scale beyond that, right? And like, if we can bring on an acquisition manager, not only are they going to buy you back time, they're gonna make you more money than you could make on your own because you got your hands in too many different buckets right now. I think that there is a time and a place where we sub out the pricing. What I would do for the time being, so this is how I would stack your team for the time being. Okay. So I would go acquisition manager. That's probably going to be your first hire, right? You're not doing so much volume where like you're going to have a generalist VA. if you've got the spare cash flow, you could bring them on. But I think this is how I would divvy it up. I would bring on a generalist. Sorry, I bring on an acquisition manager. I don't know why I'm writing this down, but it helps me think. I bring on an acquisition manager. The next that I would hire out is a market selection analyst, if you will, right? We have a guy in our business that we found just like anyone else could find for $150 a month. Every month he builds out a market selection sheet that just like shows the counties that have the most action. He doesn't find submarkets. You could definitely coach him on that. But think about that, $150 a month to remove the guesswork of where to even begin. And so now the process is, cool, look at these counties that have the best sell-through rate, best demand for the previous month. Go in there, go find all the subdivisions, go find all the markets and just mail that. So that like saves hours per week on your market selection. And I think you've got the pricing down enough, right? But I think that like an acquisition manager is going to save you time, which is going to allow you to scale your marketing. They're also going to have more time on their schedule to allow you to scale your marketing so you can go further. And that's going to bring in more revenue in the door faster than bringing on a data analyst, in my opinion. Could you say sometime we would do the total opposite? Sure, you'll probably be successful. But if we look at the fastest route to getting you to where you want to go, I think it's that, right?
Right.
Because like the levers that are going to make the difference here are having someone that's really working the leads. Like, are there leads in your CRM that are getting 40, 50, 60 touches currently in total?
No, that's a lot of touches.
It's a lot of touches, right? But that's what's required, right? So now you can go, hey, my yield for my mailers before was 2,000 mailers per deal. Now it's 1,500 because I got this acquisition manager just grinding out value from these mailers. So you're getting a better yield from your mailers. You can now send more mail because they've got more time on their schedule. Acquisition manager that I've seen can handle like 100 to 150 new leads a month. You send out 10,000 mailers, you're getting like 50 to 60, 70 leads. Right? So you can go up to 20K mailers a month. Now shit's going to start to break on the operation side. And then so you bring in a generalist VA. But the catch-all is now you've got revenue in the door. Like you've got more cash in the door than you would if you brought on a data analyst, which is going to allow you to double down, bring on the generalist VA, then bring on the data analyst. And you could have a data analyst in 6 to 8 months probably. Because if you bring on an acquisition manager, dude, they could bring in 300K this next quarter, 400K this next quarter, if you're supplying them with a pipeline of leads. And so I think that's really the move for where you're at. I know you like the sales. I know some people might say, well, do what you like and delegate the rest. Sure. But I think there's a real playbook to this.
Yeah,
right? I would kind of follow that script. But in the interim, there is no reason you can't find a part-time market selection person. Inside the LIA program, we have the template called Monthly Market Deliverable. Go download that, find someone on onlinejobs.ph, say, hey, every month I want you to fill this out with the demand and the sell-through rate. And they'll break it down into that sheet. They'll see that breaks it down by the size of the property so you know what subtypes have the most demand in that market. Yeah. It's not a surefire thing in terms of like, obviously this is like where I need to go. But it takes a lot, because I think where a lot of people get tripped up is like, all right, I'm staring at my computer. What do I do here? What market should I go to? What state should I go to? This like removes a lot of that, right? It's a little more objective.
Oh yeah, no, that's never something you enjoy, just scrolling through.
That's terrible, dude. Terrible.
I got you. It's and maybe this is where I have a blind spot because I can empirically just from my experience, right? Like it's almost never as easy. Like, oh, you got my letter. Oh, you like the price I give you? Okay, these are the next steps. Let's do this. Let's do that. I mean, there's so much negotiation and like rapport building so quickly.
Yeah.
We're giving them more money. We're negotiating down all that all the time. And I'm like, maybe I have a blind spot in what an acquisitions manager is capable of.
Yeah. I mean, like, there's definitely a gradient there in terms of quality. Sure, there's people that aren't very good at it, right? And so hopefully we can weed those people out. The truth is you're better on the phones than probably any acquisition manager you can be able to hire, right? But what's cool is they can take on more leads. And a lot of what we've seen in acquisitions, I mean, like, sure, there's some like hardcore negotiation here and there, but a lot of it's just showing up consistently, building rapport, building trust. Like these people have good enough customer service experience that they can do that. And if they know just the basics of negotiating, they can make it happen, right? We have a new acquisition manager we brought in from Mexico City. He's got no sales experience. He's working to become a pilot in Mexico. But we just kind of coached him up on some basic negotiation strategies. Got a deal last Friday. Lady wanted 80, got her down to 22. Like, these overseas folks can do that. Now, is there stuff that they're going to miss? For sure.
Yeah.
But like, I just think because they can take on a higher quantity of leads and because they can give them more attention, that yields better results than just being a hardcore closer. I'm sure there's closers out there. I've never seen them. But yeah, these people are not as good as you on the phone, but they can just do more, which I think is important.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, right now I was thinking VA and then acquisitions manager, but I really need to sit down. And I need to really kind of identify, if I do get a VA, what the heck, what is that?
What's that? Yeah.
I would do a VA like that if I knew if this was a good hire that could be a COO.
Right.
But
trouble is you just don't know until you bring them on. Right.
Right.
So I think like really one of the trip ups that I see people make when they're unfamiliar with hiring is like, dude, you can turn and burn. You can let go of these people quickly if you have to. That's totally okay. And so that's where we do the pilot period. You bring them on, they're obviously not a good fit. On to the next. And it's a lot of work for you and it's tiring and it does suck after a while. But that's how you find a diamond in the rough, right? But again, I think for just the volume that you're doing, where you're at, if I look at the levers that are going to yield the best results, I would go acquisition manager. I'll give you, after this call, I'll send you over our acquisition manager hiring template. Just go get those listings out there, right? You don't have to hire someone immediately, but just start getting in the mix of interviewing and looking at resumes, like get that ball rolling.
Yeah. I mean, I do enjoy talking to these people, but also the idea of that's not
phenomenal. Yeah, dude, I think that like the silly thing is, and whether you know this or not, I think it's true for most humans. What we're good at, there's a little bit of ego attached to it. We kind of like being good at it. We like the dopamine hit when you get it. Like there's an attachment there, but sometimes it's okay to give that up. And I think it's okay to understand that these people are not going to be as good as you in most cases, but they will, despite that, probably get better results than you. Because anytime someone is singularly focused on one task, I think they're going to yield better results. You're wearing every hat in the business right now, right? Which is tough, super tough.
No, man, I appreciate this. I'm going to do that. And if you could send me that template, that would be awesome. It's just interesting when you're talking to a seller and he'll send you pictures of other letters. Sometimes the higher offer.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just a rapport that crosses them over that line. But I hear what you're saying though, because if you can do higher quantity, even though the quality of your manager might be lower, you'll still get higher yield.
Yeah. So you got higher quantity of touches. You also got a higher quantity of total leads that they're interfacing with. Right. That's super important, right? I think that's so much of what we do in this business. Like, yes, there are exceptions where you hard close someone, but I just don't think we do that much convincing here.
Yeah.
I think a lot of like the best thing that an acquisition manager can do and you can do is just staying in the call. Like, I think that is our best kind of negotiation tactic. It's like when someone says no, you'll just give up. So it's like, well, cool. How could we make this a yes?
Right.
Anyone can do that. But we're not like using Jedi mind tricks to get these people to sell to us. You know,
you do. What's that course that you referenced before?
It's the Chris Voss course. Never Split the Difference course.
Yeah,
that's a great course on masterclass for anyone that wants to improve the negotiating. And like a lot of good sales, negotiating, all that stuff is about asking questions, right? Like I think a lot of what Chris Voss teaches is just sometimes you got to play dumb. Like one of my favorite quips for sellers that we teach our team, if they want something unreasonable, hey, how am I supposed to do that? Make them justify how they're going to get 30% over market value for the property. That stuff is really powerful and anyone can learn that. But you as the operator, there cannot be an expectation that people are going to come in knowing this. You've got to do a really good job prior to bringing anyone on of consolidating how you're going to onboard them. This is your first hire, so it doesn't have to be perfect. But I will recommend those every step of this journey, document it meticulously. Essentially build a micro course for them, record everything, put it in a Google Drive, have it in a logical sequence, because this is not going to be your last acquisition manager hire for sure. And what's a pain in the ass is when you're doing it manually, you got to do it again and again and again and again. You don't want to do that. And it also makes for a much better experience for the acquisition manager because there's something to hold them accountable to, right?
Right.
And it's easier for them to digest, but it's also like, hey, no, we talked about this and you're not doing it. You saw this. So it's like, it's a real benchmark opposed to, you remember when I said this one thing on that one call that we didn't record? It's like, what? No.
I got you. Yeah. That's cool. And I appreciate you breaking all this down. I do feel like in this space you provide, I think, the best value, especially in regards to just scaling. Like you're so business or mindset oriented as a whole, right? From a macro level.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
Appreciate that, man. I got a question for you. What can we do to make the LIA program and community better, you think, in your own words?
Man, I mean, I think, well, it's cool because I mean, any of like the thoughts that I did have, you've already taken a lot of those steps, which is cool. Just like, a little bit more calls. And I think the coaches that you brought on I think that's super valuable for anybody coming in.
Yeah.
I think one thing that you did that was really interesting was our buddy Rylan came in with kind of his take on the pricing. And there's, of course, when you get down to that, some of these minute levers that we pull in our business, everybody pulls them differently.
Yeah.
Maybe you think about what other people could do, like a guest or bonus course. I think that's interesting. Like, how does this person do that?
I think that's a really interesting concept. It's something that we've been thinking about in terms of the guest speakers that we've been bringing on. But it'd be cool to have someone who's like still in the kind of LIA ethos, like someone's inside the program, but it's kind of spun out their own ideas, right? Like Michael Bull is a good example of that. He's like, okay, cool. I mimic everything you guys do. So rural recreational, I go rural infill. And that's kind of created its own system around it. It's an interesting idea, like spinning out additional content or even courses around them. Yeah, it's interesting. That's super interesting. I like that as well. I do. One of the things that I've got deeper into, like program design and kind of understanding how people learn. And one of the things that we've been really working on is just creating a tighter feedback loop. So like now when someone goes to the program, there's milestones they have to check off. They have to get those reviewed. So there's not like this, I'm stuck on this stat part. And so I've been learning about how to make it just a better outcome for the people inside the program. But one of the things that I've taken away from that is less is more in a lot of cases, right? And I've always been of the belief, like, let me give you everything. And so I would be concerned about putting that into one program. But I think it's like, it could be like a stair-stepping process. Like, cool, you made it through this. Now you can go through that. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's really interesting. I think there's a lot of value in that. I think that's the cool thing about this business too, is like when you're first starting out, you just plug into a system, but then you make it your own 12 months in, 24 months in, and it kind of becomes your own beast. Dude, well, any parting thoughts here? Anything you want to cover before we wrap this up? I think this has been fun. Any additional questions you got for me?
Man, no, I appreciate just you breaking it down and getting the context of your story, which I didn't know about. That was really cool. But no, I mean, I know where to find you, Sumner. So if I think of anything, I'll reach out.
Yeah, you know where to get me. Hopefully I'll see you on our 12:30 call today. Preston, I appreciate you making the time, man. I know you're a private guy, as it were. So thank you for coming on here and sharing. I think that like the way I look at it is if this video, and it has no relation to if people work with us or not, but like if this video makes one person say, shoot, I can do this, that's dope. Because it's not just like, and you're experiencing this, right? Like you left the real estate agent stuff. Like this stuff can be life changing. I know it's cliche. I know it's cheesy. And like work isn't all that matters in life. I know it's easy to get caught up in that, but it's a huge part of what we do. And so one person can watch this and be like, damn, I can do this. That's awesome.
For sure. And I mean, just take actions in the mail. I mean, you never know when you're one deal away from. Like,
dude, straight up. One deal away. I always think about that. Yeah. One deal away. No, you've killed it. I'm really excited to see things unfold over this year and even beyond. I got to make a trip out there to Houston, or you got to come out to Vegas. One of the two. We got to meet each other in person. Hopefully I'll see you on our call today. Let me know if you need anything as this unwinds with the hiring, though.
Awesome, dude. Thanks for the time.
All right, brother. See you, man.
See you.